Hi, I am Dr. Janelle Duda-Banwar, and I am a Senior Research Associate with the Center for Public Safety Initiatives at RIT. We are housed in the Criminal Justice Department, and we conduct locally focused, nationally relevant action research. Some of you may be familiar with our founder, Dr. John Klofus, a renowned criminologist and RIT Distinguished Professor. Dr. Irshad Altheimer is the current director of our center, and he continues moving forward John's vision. We work closely with the community to address issues that matter to the community. We push for data to drive decisions, and we push for process and planning. We do this in collaboration with a number of community-based organizations, such as Rise Up Rochester, Teen Empowerment, and the Father Tracy Advocacy Center. I'm assuming we have a lot of smart people in the room today who know what research is, but I think it's important to explain that research looks like many things. It can be in a lab in fully controlled conditions. It can be downloading housing data from the Census Bureau, running statistical analyses, and making sense of those findings. Or it can be meeting in a community to answer the question, what are the consequences of an open-air drug market? It all begins with a research question, followed by a methodological approach, data collection, analysis, and then findings. At the root of research is curiosity about the world around us. So then, how do I fit into felicific calculus? Upon moving studio spaces, Eric made the observation, my friends are calling this a bad neighborhood. Then he moves into the studio and notices all these payphones. He sees the visual artistry in these objects, but then Eric takes it further. He starts to identify these as social markers. And now he's on to something more than simply the beauty and emotion that these photographs emit. He's wondering, what exactly do these payphones mean? Why are they still here? Why do some operate and some don't? Who uses them? He has questions and lots of them. Now, unbeknownst to Eric, a research agenda seems to be emerging around the payphones and neighborhood social conditions, pulling me into the project because maybe I know something about research. So what is a social marker? I think about social markers as cues that tell you something about the social status of the community, including the quality of life or even social deprivation. Traditional social markers include crime data, employment data, and income levels, but there are also many non-traditional social markers. So let's go a little deeper. When you drive through a neighborhood and you see cracked sidewalks, litter, dilapidated porch steps, paint peeling on houses, boarded up buildings, what does that indicate to you? You might say a bad neighborhood. I'll push back on that. When you drive through a neighborhood with wide, maintained sidewalks, planters with vibrant flowers, big houses with new siding, new windows, long driveways, manicured yards, what does that indicate to you? A good neighborhood, perhaps? Why are we using the terms good versus bad? Is this an accurate dichotomy? Notice that I didn't even describe any people so far, just the environment, yet we are talking about people. Essentially, good people are people who have money, access to more opportunity, and live in neighborhoods that have been invested in by their local government. And bad people are poor and live in neighborhoods with significant government divestment. So then why is righteousness associated with opportunity? How is an entire neighborhood righteous? Is that even possible? I imagine that many of you live in the good neighborhoods. Have you ever experienced bad behavior in these good neighborhoods? I certainly have. What about these so-called bad neighborhoods? Have you ever experienced good behavior in these neighborhoods? Of course you have. See, when we associate poverty with morality, it puts the entire burden on the individual and omits everything that we know about poverty, like how social mobility is entwined with where you were born. You don't even have control over that. How concentrated poverty overlaps race in disturbing ways. So now race is in the mix. And the overlap between poverty and the criminal justice system entanglement, which leads to even more poverty. Notice that these don't have to do with individual traits or personalities, but these are social constructs that impact opportunity. So let's take my not so unique abstract thoughts and bring them into focus on the local level. I've been studying the local heroin market for more than 4 years. On the screen is a density map which shows the concentration of drug overdoses across Monroe County. These are fatal and non-fatal overdoses known to law enforcement, so someone called 911. In 2018, the peak year for overdoses, both locally and nationally, there were more than 1,100 overdoses across Monroe County. As you can see, these overdoses are concentrated where? This neighborhood along North Clinton Ave between Upper Falls and Avenue D, where you see the red spot. Bad people doing bad things, using drugs, in a bad neighborhood, right? It fits the narrative. But let's unpack this data. Who exactly is overdosing? Who are the customers? Across the county, 75% of the overdose victims are white, majority male. Okay, this tracks. 70% of the county population is white, non-Hispanic, but still there's an overrepresentation of males overdosing. Now let's look just at the city of Rochester. 66% of the overdose victims in Rochester are white, non-Hispanic, but only 36% of the Rochester population is white, non-Hispanic. Now, let's look at this location that has the highest concentration of overdoses across the entire county. 50% of the overdose victims in 2018 were white, non-Hispanic, while only 3% of the neighborhood residents are white, non-Hispanic. So the people who are overdosing overwhelmingly do not live in these neighborhoods where they are overdosing. So what is the point? People who live in the neighborhood are dealing with the consequences of our nation's opioid problem, even though, on the majority, these residents did not contribute to the opioid problem. So then why is it happening here? We're back to the bad neighborhood. So how bad are these residents really? I'm sure there is still a way to blame them. Surely they could have done something to stop this from happening, right? So what did happen when residents tried to push back against the drug market? I conducted interviews and focus groups with residents to find out. Have you ever had to deal with people selling drugs on the corner of your street? People injecting heroin at a bus stop? People overdosing on the sidewalk? What happens when you call the police about drug deals and no one shows up? What happens when you show up to city council meetings and nothing changes? What happens when you strike up the courage to say something to the dealers, but they won't move? It's really easy to judge other people. Would you stay motivated if it took 3 years to get speed bumps installed on your street to deter drug traffic? If it took 4 years to demolish an abandoned property that's a known drug house? If you sat in meetings with the police, and in those meetings, they talked about observing drug sales on camera, yet no arrests were made. If it took 3 years to build a small fence around a dumpster to deter drug dealers and open drug use, and the fence still isn't complete. These social markers, including the payphones, indicate a neglected neighborhood, and this reputation persists in spite of all the efforts of the residents. We reduce all of their pain, sweat, and tears to, that's a bad neighborhood, solely blaming the people. What about the role of government and powerful institutions, including the influence that the arts can have? So what can you do? Visit these neighborhoods by getting some of the best Puerto Rican food around, check out the various wall therapy murals in the neighborhood, visit La Marqueta at International Plaza in the warm months. Do something instead of diminishing and oversimplifying the issue to being a bad neighborhood. The problem is not the people who are trying to thrive.